Hey guys, okay, I took the time to watch part 2 of that video that we talked about on the last video that we did. A channel creator who I pretty much respect. I think he has a good thing going on. He's intelligent and articulate, and his videos are actually interesting. He is so different than all the other ones, let me tell you. So anyway, I respect the guy, and he interviewed one of the people who claimed to have been a close friend of Christopher Watt's wife. So in the last video, I spoke about the first half of that interview, and now I'm going to touch on the second half of that interview. Just a little recap on the first part. She claimed that Christopher Watt's wife told her that she was diagnosed with lupus when she was a teenager. But that's very different than what we've been told. Because what we've been told is that she was diagnosed in May, Lupus Awareness Month of 2010. So it's kind of interesting that she had her close friend on Facebook believing that she was diagnosed with lupus when she was a teenager. It's kind of interesting, isn't it, to have so many different stories floating around? You know, how she had to have fertility treatments and how the bankruptcy was all about all of her medical bills. That's a partial list, of course. So I watched the second half of that interview. The other thing about the first interview for the recap is that they saw each other just one time. One time. And it sounds like they didn't see each other for very long. One time in 8.5 years. She spoke with Christopher Watts on the phone one time when she called to say that she wasn't going to come to the wedding. They saw each other in person one time back in 2011. And she's a close friend. I think that's interesting. So in the second half of the interview, we learned that she claims that the last time she spoke with Christopher Watt's wife was after she saw the photo being posted on Facebook of the doll that was wrapped in that white, they call it the twister sheet that you use for the twister game. So it must have been upside down, I guess. And she told this story again, how that was something that Christopher Watts took the photo of and sent it to her, to his wife, I mean. But you know what? We've checked into it, of course. And that photo was taken on the 9th. On the 9th, Christopher Watts was at work. So what's that about? Who really sent that photo? Hello. He was at work that day. When that photo was sent, he was working. Isn't that kind of creepy? And why are we being told something different? And then why is this, close friend, 9 months later, saying, oh yeah, Christopher Watts sent that photo? Really? Because there are a lot of us who believe that actually his wife sent that photo. So that's one interesting part of that interview. Another interesting part is she said that when she heard Christopher Watts with that interview, that she just knew there was something different about his tone. There was something different about his tone. She spoke with him one time in 8.5 years on the phone. She never met him, and she spoke with him one time in 8.5 years on the phone, but she knew there was something different about his tone. Interesting. Oh, another thing that I found interesting was that the close friend said that Christopher Watts' wife didn't sugarcoat anything. And she also said she was a fighter. Isn't that interesting? She didn't sugarcoat anything, and she was a fighter. You know what I think? I think that if she didn't sugarcoat anything, and remember in one of her videos, she said she doesn't care what anyone says about her. I think she wouldn't have a problem at all with our channel where we discuss true crime cases, because we don't sugarcoat anything here either. Oh, and they talked in the interview about how she was truly a good mother because she wanted to choose the right schools, and she was always making sure that the children ate healthy. I think that maybe the people in that interview haven't watched the videos that we've seen, because unfortunately, I think Bella was hungry. She said so. And remember that video where she's hiding in the closet eating a bag of marshmallows? Worse than that was the video where she said she was hungry and her mother ignored her and started eating right in front of her, and Bella started to cry. One thing I noticed in the second part of the interview is that her friend seemed to be shaking her head no. Just kind of an interesting observation if you're into studying body language at all. And she used the word genuine again, which I think is really interesting. When you think about it, she saw her one time for a very short time in 8.5 years. So genuine, I think, is an interesting word for her to choose. Oh, get this too. In the second part of the interview, this kind of made me laugh. She's like, oh yeah, Christopher Watts was worried about having to pay child support and alimony because his wife was a stay-at-home mom. If you guys still believe that he would have had to have paid any child support or alimony, please do some research. Just Google alimony in Colorado, and you'll see why that comment just seems really out of place. And what's this about her being a stay-at-home mom? I mean, come on. 9 months later, and we're still lying about that? Come on, people. She wasn't a stay-at-home mom. The children were in daycare 5 days per week. That's not a stay-at-home mom, especially when they get picked up by their father from daycare and then they're put to bed, what, at 6 o'clock or 6:30 at night? Okay, dokie. Oh, and then she made the comment, money was not the most important thing to her. Really? It wasn't? I don't know. I'm disappointed when I see an interview like this. I'm very disappointed. Because when somebody has only met somebody one time in 8.5 years, I call that a Facebook friend. And I think that's something that's very concerning about this case, is I think that Christopher Watts' wife had friends on Facebook, but when your friends are all online, when you consider your online friends your friends, then if you do need help or if you are suffering, or if you are crying out for attention, then of course it's easier to have your friends online, right? Because real life friends can see through your con. One other thing that I think is interesting is that this friend, who she had just met one time, was invited to her wedding. And we learned from that other video that that other friend who said she knew her for 13 years and then 11 years and then 10 years, and we kind of wondered why the discrepancy, like, why don't you know how long you've known someone, right? We learned that she was invited to the wedding too, and she had already known her for 4 or 5 years before the wedding, or I think 7 years, depending on which story you go with. She'd already known her for years, as a friend, and they didn't meet until her wedding. But think about that. If you're getting married and you're sitting down and figuring out your guest lists, and it's a second marriage and it's going to be a little bit smaller than your first, right? Are you inviting your friends from Facebook? I don't know. To me, that looks kind of like a gift grab. Just my opinion.